Hello, everyone. I was absolutely blown away with some key findings that I spent a good amount of today getting into. When I went down the rabbit hole once again, it uncovered this thing, that thing, and I said, my God, there is a timeline here in regards to the past, once again, the present, and the soon to be future. October. So much going on in regards to the month of October. So without further ado, we're just going to simply jump into the material. Smash the like if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. First, let's start off with here. And basically, it is this particular gentleman, the unseen person. A lot of you guys already know who this person is. And that is Arthur Britto. Why am I presenting this to you? Well, when I full screen this, I want you to understand the basics. And that is understanding that there's other key people, obviously, other than David Schwartz. And of course, Arthur Britto was the founder, president, co-founder of Ripple Labs and designer of XRP Ledger. We also know that David Schwartz is basically the architect, but thought I would point that out. You're going to see some things, and later on, I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty about PolySign. This is not a deep dive about PolySign, but some emphasis about PolySign, and like it says, fintech company building the institutional infrastructure covering the digital assets ecosystem and a proud parent of standard custody. Interesting to see some of these things, but more importantly, when you jump over to this, you see that there's this email, if you will, of Arthur Britto back in 2013 that goes into mention specifically the purpose of having XRP in the network as an asset is twofold. First, it helps bridge between different currencies, and second, it's used basically for very small transaction fees that help prevent people from spamming the network. Right, so let's split the requirement of XRP into two parts. Most of us understand the part about it being a bridge currency, but a lot of us don't understand or have never even really gotten into the weeds of this second part from Arthur Britto, and that is being used as a network attack prevention mechanism. That sounds absolutely nuts. As I get more into this, I want you guys to understand before we continue the significance of non-disclosure agreements. There's always going to be the random person that's going to be like, XRP don't move much, price don't move much, garbage token, garbage coin. Well, with that said, understand XRP is not the only cryptocurrency that has NDAs. Listen to this from the one and only David Schwartz in regards to him being a guest speaker over at, the University of Texas, because he gets into the whole thing about his background, but it's what he points out at the 37-minute mark in regards to PolySign. This is just an example. We'll be back here shortly and tie everything in and why you want to hear this particular outline. Here we go.
Yes, go ahead.
So how does PolySign plan on solving the current issues with digital asset custody? For example, the cryptographic key unlocks asset access to all funds. Once the secret's stolen or lost, once the recovery.
God, I really wish I could answer that, but I'm under a non-disclosure agreement with PolySign, and because they're in stealth mode right now, I don't know what I'm allowed to tell you.
Okay.
I can tell you that they're in the custody business, and of course I can tell you that they're doing it like an amazing way that, Arthur and I are behind this, we're the lead guys on the technology, and obviously like we're doing it, we think we're doing it right, but unfortunately, I don't know what. I really wish I could tell you because it's so freaking cool. I'm busting with wanting to tell people what we did, and they're like, oh no, we're still in stealth mode, it's still non-disclosure, so unfortunately I cannot answer that question, but I feel really bad about it.
I guess can I ask one more? I guess in the cryptographic valuation model that Susan at the published, the high estimate for assumed XRP adoption for forex trading said was 3%. Of global forex, do you believe that's a high estimate, or What do you think of that?
This is an answer that I'll be completely honest, because obviously I would like to say that I like to think that it can take over the world, but in my heart of hearts, I believe that these prices are rational. I know that sounds crazy, but in my heart of hearts, I believe that if this price was really, if the price of any digital asset was really irrational, there are billionaires who have access to the cryptocurrency market. If the price of any cryptocurrency didn't accurately reflect its long-term prospects, why wouldn't some billionaire buy a crap ton of it, and bid the price up? I can't wrap my head around how these markets could really be irrational. I'm not an economist, and there are people who tell me that I'm out of my mind about that. But that is true. I recognize I'm opining outside of my area of expertise, but that is really, in my heart of hearts, what I believe. I believe these markets have to be rational, because I don't see, not necessarily that every spike is rational, there aren't pump and dumps or fake volume, not that everything, but that the course pricing has to be rational. How could it not be? Come on. And so if Bitcoin had a 2% chance of taking over $1 trillion of the economy, or XRP had a 50% chance of getting 6% of the forex market, how could it be that some billionaire isn't oh yeah, I see that, and buying billions of dollars? There's enough money, there's enough self-interested people who have access to the markets. I can't believe, again, I'm not an economist, and so I'm explicitly warning you, this is just how I, as a non-expert, feel. I cannot make myself believe that the prices are fundamentally irrational.
Thank you.
Welcome back. So with that said, think about what he said in regards to non-disclosure agreements, and also how he's rationally looking at, the markets and so on. But more in particular, the whole concept, back to that reference about the World Bank saying that Ripple would have to be a global stablecoin, XRP. And of course, Stellar's part of that mix. Some people will misinterpret this and say, well, yeah, it's just going to be at a low price. But again, if you've seen the other deep dive in the past, talk about even XRP being a high stable value, right, moving forward. And David Schwartz gives a particular example about that as well. More than welcome to check that out if you choose to do so. Moving forward, check this out. This gets pretty good. You're going to see here some key highlights, and here it is. Basically speaking, it's that CEO David Schwartz, part of this thing called David Schwartz Enterprises. And like it says, 1988 to January 1991, but he invented a hierarchical system for distributing workloads over multiple computers. I did this outline with you guys just a few days ago, but again, it handled interactions with the USPTO to obtain United States Patent 5025369, managed marketing and licensing efforts. Again, this patent that dates all the way back to the late 80s, 1980s, right? And then, of course, some other key players came into the mix. Remember that part, because you're going to want to hear more about this. Let's get more into the outline and why I'm presenting it to you guys. You see here that David Schwartz developed encrypted cloud storage and enterprise messaging systems for organizations like CNN and the National Security Agency. Don't forget the whole part of messaging systems, because that is going to play a big part of this outline as we get towards the end. As we get more into this, look at this key highlight. I had a YouTube video about this. It was banned from YouTube due to copyright. It's exclusive on X because they could care less about copyright. But nonetheless, you could call this like a part 2 or 3 if you want. Computer hacker Martin, played by Robert Redford, heads a group of specialists who test the security of various San Francisco companies. I'm referring to the movie Sneakers if you want to see it. Martin is approached by 2 National Security Agency officers who ask him to steal a newly invented decoder. Martin and his team discover that the black box can crack any encryption code, posing a huge threat if it lands in the wrong hands. When Martin realizes the NSA men who approached him are rogue agents, they frame him for the murder of the device's inventor. Release date September 9th, 1992. Now, some people are going to think that all of a sudden Maximus has gotten into the weeds of going to, like, the concept of, for example, conspiracy theories. I'm not really trying to do that, but I'm sure there's going to be a few people that are going to allude to that. I just think it's more than coincidence on some of these things. And again, take it as you will. I'm not trying to basically twist anybody's arm on the belief of conspiracy theories, but again, back to the screenshot of the movie, and that is Sneakers. Robert Redford, a few other key people in that film. XRP 262. I'm not the only one that's talked about it. I've done a video again in the past. Many influencers, researchers have talked about this, but I decided to get more into this. So XRP 262, again, that screenshot, because again, from the movie, from the gentleman's computer screen, Federal Reserve Transfer Node, National Headquarters, Remote Systems Network Station, and you see all these different codes in regards to interbank funds transfer. And then, of course, when people see the whole thing of international telelink access, XRP 262, it makes them wonder, like, what in the world, does it have any meaning? Is it a big nothing burger? Who knows? But again, been there, done that. But then things started popping up for me. And again, this is another reason why I'm bringing it to you guys. So for one, there is actually a coin, or I guess we should call it a token. There's XRP-262 with wrapped H bar. And it's like, why? It's just some guy that wanted to take advantage of some of this stuff? Maybe. But it's a thing. And as I got more into it, I even went to dyor.io. There's a token listing, right? So it mentions that XRP 262 is a trickle asset that utilizes capital as a productive means to extend a liquidity's potential value. It says XRPL2 Enterprise conducts the ability to warp threshold price points by shifting the decimal in a particular time frame for an effective equivalency to available resources. This thing called LIM, which is local instant messaging, again, remember the whole thing of David Schwartz with messaging, is then used to predict and bid these thresholds to trickle the potential gains from the inverse function. All liquidity is determined by private ledger interactions. The majority of the supply is reserved for who? Governmental organizations. Now, I don't know. It's hard to know. And again, that's just a little bit of what's on the surface. But as I got more into this, I saw some key things. Number one, the logo, and that is a logo that I recognize because, again, another Keanu Reeves movie, right? Here's the thing. While we are not talking about the quant outline in regards to Neo and all that, this is another thing that really caught my attention, and that particular movie I'm referencing did come out before The Matrix. I think it came out in 1995, if I'm not mistaken. I'll introduce that movie to you here in a second, but it's interesting, and more in particular, how it mentions, once again, some of these key things, and like it says, XRPL2 offers mirror tech reserves for government agencies or partners. There's a thing called the LIM contract tokenism, and there's just a lot of weird stuff that's basically in this, right? You're more than welcome to look into it. Again, some of the prices, and it's just like, it's just like somebody who made this and just trying to get people to look into it, sparks interest. Call it what you want. But even on Aquarius, I know some of you guys are into Aqua. I've gotten so many requests of people want me to cover Aqua, and hey, awesome, I'm not personally invested in the Aqua, but it does seem like a good project. That's not the point. But what you see here is a pairing. XLM, for example, of all things, with XRP 262. And I thought that was incredibly interesting to see this. The other thing that was super interesting is when we go to the next page, you see here they have this off-chain info. And again, it goes into some of the stuff I kind of already got into. But again, the logo kind of bothers me. And I thought, well, there's got to be something about this. So even on CMC, there's some volume in regards to this. It shows the price at 60,710, which tells me it's got an extremely limited supply. But why? And more importantly, why is there not a lot of buzz about this? Well, back to this. XRP Drops has this in his latest episode, at least from a while back. It mentions the whole thing of What is XRP 262? Why do we also find a reference in the movie Sneakers? No More Secrets from 1992, quoted from the movie. Anybody want to shut down the Federal Reserve? And again, you can go to, I think it's like movieclips.com, or, you know, they're listing on YouTube, and see specifically this. I can't play it here because, again, the copyright, and I just don't want to get another strike against me because, you know, trying to create content for you guys, and obviously we would still love to have the channel. But nonetheless, opens up some doors to other things. Back to the whole thing about Stellar. Again, it gets really interesting because even from Stellar, you see that there's some transactions that basically happened. And how long ago? Well, as we get into that, you see, for example, again, and you know, this logo that bothers me, highlighted in the bright blue, but you see, as of recently, today, September 28th, by the time you guys get it, depending on where you're viewing it from and when you get it, it might be the 29th or heck the 1st, depending on when you watch it. But again, there's transactions going on here, and more importantly, like Stellar, like, anyway, it's not a Stellar video, but nonetheless, that was interesting. Here's a screenshot from the movie that I'm referring to here in a bit. And, you know, it's turned upside down, totally the Ripple logo. And, you know, how many times have you seen that one particular video where it shows, you know, money going in and out, right, of that Ripple logo? As we get further into this, here's the movie that I'm referring to, Johnny Mnemonic. And I will give you a little gist of this. So, for one, unless you're like a hardcore Keanu Reeves fan or like Cyberpunk and so on, you probably haven't seen it. I haven't seen it fully. I've seen bits and pieces. But the point I'm trying to share with you guys is it's based off a short story of May in 1981. I'm actually born in May in 1981, so that intrigues me. But the film is set in 2021, portrays a dystopian future racked by a tech-induced plague. Okay, interesting. But nonetheless, you have mega corporations, organized crime. But Keanu Reeves plays Johnny, data courier with an overload brain implant. I mean, think about some of these things. You know, like, obviously where I'm going with this is like Neuralink, right? But the point is, he has securely stored confidential information, and he's involved with like mega corporations attempting to suppress the data. I mean, say what you want. What did we see in regards to XRP? The suppression of the SEC in regards to their technology, suppressing again the data. Kind of gets really interesting when you look more further into it. But this part really got my attention. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do a video on this because now it's getting a little weird. And on top of that, more than a coincidence, because it's really interesting. In 2021, the society is driven by a virtual internet. And think about the whole thing of what we've seen since 2021, last bull run, about the whole concept, everybody, of the metaverse. This really caught my attention. So, society is driven by virtual internet, created a degenerative effect called nerve attenuation, probably not pronouncing that right, syndrome, or NAS. Or Nas. Nas is my favorite rapper of all time, but that's beside the point. Mega corporations control much of the world, intensifying the class hostility already created by the NAS. But interesting to see that because, again, the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, 2021 going to 2022, it's really interesting, some of these key things. And more in particular, again, if you want more about this, even from Google, nerve attenuation syndrome is a fictional disease, again, from that movie, featured 1995 movie Johnny Mnemonic. But again, what does it say? Well, it mentions a pandemic, and again, this takes place in 2021. Overexposure to what? Electromagnetic radiation from technology. That's interesting because, as we also know, look at this. Simple Google search. What was the popularity of 5G in 2021? 5G became really popular in 2021, with 5G connections reaching 540 million by the end of the year. Global adoption, of course, increased. We know the rest is history. But again, 2021. And again, this is something that was, maybe it's a coincidence, call it what you want. But again, based off of something that came out in 1981, well, here's where I'm going with this. May 1981, science fiction novel, short story. And it's just extremely interesting to see some about this, or some things about this, especially when it talks about, cybernetic surgery. Johnny is a data trafficker, and he's gone, I guess under the knife in regards to this, to have a data storage system implanted in his head. Again, back to the whole thing of some of these concepts like Neuralink, Elon Musk, and all that, right? Maybe Elon Musk is secretly a big fan of that movie. I don't know. But, it does make you wonder. All right, let's take you over to here for a second, because here is something I want to get back on topic with the whole thing of Ripple and XRP. So we saw some key things, and again, back to that reference of Arthur Britto. In this publication, that's from richmondfed.org, and I'll take you to this key area of it. It's an economic brief, but it references a discount window of lending, policy trade-offs, and the 1985, Bank of New York computer failure. And I'm going to share this part with you real quick, because a lot of you guys may know about this, maybe you don't. But back in 1985, November 21st to be exact, Bank of New York suffered a software failure that left it unable to redeliver securities it had received from other institutions as an intermediary. The result of the failure was that the bank sought and received $22.6 billion in discount window lending from the New York Fed, a record-setting amount. The episode presents a case study for considering when discount window lending and similar interventions are justified, as a matter of efficiency as well as the need for policymakers to take account the possible moral hazard that may lead to inadequate safeguards against failures, whether operational breakdowns or deficient financial strategies. And of course, they talk about this mechanism, but more importantly, through the Federal Reserve Bank, and how you have this loans to depository institutions, on and on. But again, interesting to see this because, as you see right here, again, that disruption. Think about where we're going with XRP. It's a disruptor of what? Well, a lot of things. The traditional money system, the traditional monetary supply of funds and where they're allocated and remittances, and the rest is history. But in 1985, the Bank of New York was only one of 4 institutions responsible for clearing most Treasury securities trades for major Wall Street brokers. And like it also mentions, these transactions were carried out through an electronic securities transfer system, again operated by the Fed, called FedWire. Clearing agents such as Bank of New York receive securities from a party to a transaction, the selling side, and then re-deliver the securities to the counterparty, the buying side, via FedWire. The Fed operated the system on a delivery versus payment basis. I mean, say what you want. If you see my quant outline, we talked about some of this stuff. So I thought was extremely interesting, to say the least. So what else do I have in regards to this? Well, as you can also see, the point is, at the closing of the funds, Bank of New York obtained a discount window loan of $22.6 billion, and that was 150% of the bank's assets, and more than 3 times the size of the peak borrowing of Continental Illinois the previous year. As it gets more into this, you're going to see some other key things, because like it mentions, again, Treasury Securities Transfer System. Don't forget that part. All this will make sense in a little bit. As I get more into this, I want you guys to see this. This is from a document straight from the World Bank Group. And in this particular independent evaluation group study, if you will, it goes on to mention specifically some key things I think that I should bring to your attention. And that is this part about private sector actors, which are called triple Ps, and how they could use their management skill and capacity for innovation to improve efficiency and quality standards. You're going to hear more about this here in a bit, but governments pay a fee to the private partner for the services provided, and more importantly, the private sector uses the whole thing of paying for operating costs and interest charges to repay debt and return on equity. Think about Ripple XRP. I mean, if anything, if we have another great big financial collapse of our country, would it make more sense to use on-demand liquidity instead of bailing out the banks with the use of governmental funds of money that we just simply don't have by turning on the money printer? Yeah, you know where I'm going with that. As I get more into this, I want to share something that's really interesting because we brought up the whole thing of treasuries, and that leads me over to here. This is from the tokenizer, not to be confused with the researcher. But on this particular platform, what you see here is something extremely interesting, and that is Ripple and Open Eden launch tokenized US Treasury bills on, of course, the XRP ledger. And more importantly, how long ago was this reported? Yeah, last month, August 6, 2024, Ripple, a provider of enterprise blockchain and crypto solutions, had partnered with OpenEden, a tokenization platform, to introduce tokenized U.S. Treasury bills called T-bills on the XRP ledger. This initiative makes short-term U.S. government debt available in tokenized form of blockchain. So that's very, very interesting, and apparently things are going to come out of this, but again, it's the expansion of the real world asset market, because as we know, tokenizing US Treasury bills on the XRP ledger will basically cause things to be more, I guess you could say, enhanced, more efficient, but institutions are looking into tokenization, as we know, to diversify their portfolios. More importantly, optimize asset management. Check this out for a second, because it gets really, really, really interesting. Couple months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, May 17, 2024, from the Crypto Basic, ex-Federal Reserve discusses Ripple and XRP role in U.S. public policy. Why am I sharing this with you? Because this mentions some key things, and that is this. This particular gentleman says, I did go from working from the or for the Federal Reserve, which was the deep state, to a poker game with other deep state players like from Google, Visa, and they talked about this new company. There was no Bitcoin company, but there was a company called Ripple. Yeah, of course. When it comes to cross-border payments, it's not going to be BTC. It's too slow. So what else do I have? And more importantly, like, why are we really truly connecting all this? Well, from the federalreserve.gov, you will see from this publication about U.S. path to faster payments is the name of it. But again, United States path to faster payments. Well, on page 38 of 62 of this particular PDF, there's this appendix, and it says Faster Payments Task Force Participant Roster. And more importantly, when you go into the list, they have a list of participants, but does it mention Ripple? Well, it does. It mentions it specifically. It says here that you have Ryan Zagone as, you know, the Ripple participant. And the other thing it also mentioned is that Ripple is a solution that empowers providers to make real-time cross-border payments. Cross-border payments today generally take 4 to 5 days to settle, etc., etc. Ripple enables full visibility into payment status. We understand this, right? This is, you know, something that we should all know for the most part by now. But as I got further into this, there's another thing I thought I would jump into, and this again is actually from Ripple. If you go to ripple.com, you will see here specifically on this article about bridging the gap between public and private collaboration, but basically digital asset innovation. It says that this year Ripple partnered with TRM Labs and Circle. Shout out to Dennis Leal, who provided me some of the research in regards to this. So, Brother Sir Francisco, I really do appreciate it. But it was the support of Elevandi and Ecosystem. You know, it's kind of chopped off on it. That's actually the name of the organization. But they were to host 2 public-private roundtables. Now, when we get more into the weeds of this, really pay attention to this because it gets extremely interesting. In these public-private roundtables, they discuss topics of critical importance for the industry, regulations around decentralized finance, and more importantly, the future of digital payments. As you can see here, it gets more into the weeds of all this because as the digital asset landscape continues to evolve, the collaboration between public and private entities will be to have a key to unlocking its full potential, driving financial inclusion and shaping the future of global finance. Ripple looks forward to continuing these discussions with key stakeholders so that we can continue and create building blocks for global regulatory frameworks. Again, that's the next big giant thing for not just Ripple, but the whole entire industry moving forward. As I get more into this, I want to share and show, I should say, this whole thing. And the point is going cashless, stablecoin payments 101. But again, September 16th, that wasn't that long ago from the publication from Ripple. Now, here's where it gets extremely interesting. Sologenic, right, has this whole thing. And I know some of you guys are invested in Sologenic and Corium and so on. Those are good projects. Don't get me wrong. I covered Sologenic on an X Space in the past, and I felt as though it was a really underrated one. But nonetheless, I want you guys to understand this key finding that Francisco Dennis Lill is sharing with us. And like it says, it's about the minting process. Again, back to this whole thing of what in the world is this whole thing of XRP 262? So look what it says. Each NFT must be minted inside a collection. Collection is an issuer that mints only one of each asset type, but can hold multiple NFTs. Minting is done through the NFT workshop section on the Sologenic platform, but each collection has a unique ID, which is the XRPL address of the issuer. And again, look at what it says. This address has the following metadata. And you can see it literally written into that particular code. And it's a sample collection of metadata. So it's like, metadata, some of these other examples. And as we get into it, here's the point. TRM Labs, has this whole thing of being the first and only FedRAMP, yeah, you read that right, that was authorized for blockchain intelligence platform, and they got to spread the news about this thing called ACAMS. And ACAMS is a global community dedicated to ending financial crime. But it says if you visited their booth, they broke a sweat at Run Club. And again, it's just like, what is this? What is this whole thing of FedRAMP? Because when we think of, Fed and, the ramping, I think of like on and off ramps. I think of, for example, especially with the Fed, Fed Now, Fed Wire. So where are we going with this? Well, as we blow this up a little bit more, and I take you to the whole thing of ACAMS, this opened up because ACAMS talks about how they have an infographic that breaks down effective fraud, and basically speaking, they go into the details about the benefits of data sharing and legislative frameworks and so on and so forth. But here's where it gets extremely interesting. I've gone ahead and blown this up for you guys because what you see right here mentions specifically this. And as you see on the far right side, what does it mention right here, literally? Well, legislative frameworks. But in the middle, it mentions how that kicks it over to bank-to-bank data sharing initiatives that have established protocols to allow real-time intelligence sharing to identify patterns of fraudulent behavior. But more importantly, back to that whole thing of, triple Ps, public-private partnerships. Why does that keep popping up? And more in particular, like the whole thing with XRP, 262, say what you want. I didn't want to dismiss that because this allows members to share transactional information to reveal typologies, inform a strategic assessment, or identify high-value targets. High-value targets. Interesting. As I got more into the outline with you guys, this was very interesting. This is a publication from an independent source called brightwalldarkroom.com. Elaborating about the 1992 film Sneakers. But here's where it gets really, really interesting. Back to the whole thing about the black box and how, at least in the film, without ruining the film for you, it turns out that there's actually an all-powerful code breaker capable of breaking encryptions on any high-security computer system you could think of, from the Federal Reserve to the National Power Grid. My goodness, sounds spooky. And the air traffic control system. It's the ultimate bad guy tool, an instrument that can make an act of terrorism easy, and Martin just handed it off to this guy named Cosmo and his particular men. So, thought that was interesting. And again, if you're wondering about this, this is a reference to this specific scene. This isn't going to get hit with the copyright because it's just a particular picture. But if you know, go watch the clip from, was it movieclips.com or the one on YouTube. But here's the thing that's in question. U.S. Department of Energy, New England States Power Distribution Grid emergency shutdown options. Again, this is going to get kind of crazy. I get that. But it's worth pointing out, and we're going to come back to this, you know, in a little bit. But again, back to the whole thing of like the Stakers film, 1992, and back to the whole thing of David Schwartz. Because in 1992, as we know, part of his resume, he was a co-founder of a medical device manufacturing company that developed, manufactured, and sold non-invasive medical device to provide objective measures of the presence and severity of heart murmurs and related conditions. David Schwartz back then obtained an FDA and other regulatory approvals to permit the legal sale and use of the device and the ability to bill insurance companies for its use. So that was what was going on in 1992. But here's what gets really interesting. From this Forbes citation, it's literally called Ripple's $1 Trillion Man. Maybe some of you guys seen it. But again, also back to 1992, David Schwartz and his father, a doctor of internal medicine, which I never knew that until recently, co-founded a medical technology company, which that part we know, that developed a non-invasive device for recording data about heart murmurs. The product didn't sell well, but demand for programmers rose during the dot-com era, and Schwartz pursued a number of network-related programming positions. Meanwhile, he was getting interested in cryptography, and in 2001, he landed at a company in Santa Clara, California called Webmaster Inc., where he helped design early cloud-based storage system. Think about that. You know, for a lot of us, we don't even know about some of these concepts until the last few years. He was part of it way back before everything or everybody else even came up with some of these concepts. But during his decade there, he also consulted for, of course, the NSA, and he helped integrate the agency's networking software with the existing security and public key infrastructure technology. Guys, gals, everybody's listening. In other words, Schwartz was gaining a working knowledge of cryptography at a high level. It was a fantastic experience, according to David Schwartz. The end game is just money moving invisibly, as easily as information. Think about that for a second. You know, and more importantly, think about this. So later on, he developed the online persona, Joel Katz, and he still has that. I had no idea it was inspired by Stimson J. Cat from Ren and Stimpy show. But the pseudonym, he basically went there, you know, from there to publish his philosophical, you know, meanderings. But his widely read Joel Katz blog is subtitled "Democracy is Vulnerable to a 51% Attack." If you guys remember the other deep dive we talked about in regards to before Bitcoin XRP, this is one of the references, because he says democracy is vulnerable to a 51% attack in an allusion to the tipping point at which one party could gain majority control of a cryptocurrency, no longer making it decentralized. As we get more into this outline, you're going to see how I connect this. And shout out to everybody that stayed the course. I know I get really into the weeds of these deep dives, but you're going to see why that makes sense. Pay attention to that. Because I'm sure a lot of you guys know about, for example, people like Dan Pena. I'm not exactly a big fan of him. I think he's a little bit too vulgar, but it is what it is. But what does Dan Pena always mention all the time? He always mentions that Bitcoin is going to go to quote unquote effing zero. And he was like, if you know the guy behind all this, you know, you get the heck out and run, blah, 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 right? That's conspiracy in itself. But that's interesting that one party could gain majority control of a cryptocurrency, no longer making it decentralized. Think about that. When we talk about parties, could it be, for example, a communist party? That's a little clue I'm going to give you as we move forward. All right, so here's the next part I want to get into. And shout out to Francisco Dennis Leal. Is this particular clip, okay? I'm going to play the whole thing, but put emphasis on a particular bank that's going to be mentioned here shortly. Smash the like if you haven't done so already. Let's go ahead and play this. We'll be right back. Here we go.
And take a look at what Deutsche Bank is doing now with Project Guardian, and the work that they're doing with Axelar will be presented in November. So kind of wait for them to share a little bit more about what they're testing in this proof of concept. But this stuff is, you know, we're on the precipice. Like, we are finally getting the pieces of infrastructure in that we're really moving forward. And so I think that we're very excited about it. And we think that Ripple can absolutely end up being one of the major hubs that kind of creates that first step that brings on those larger financial institutions to start.
We're working on a number of different potential advancements in XRP Ledger technology to better support real world assets. So one example is, a token type made specifically for RWA called multi-purpose tokens that allows for storage of metadata directly with the asset. There's a few other advantages in terms of scalability, flexibility as well, but we're really trying to increase the suitability for the XRP ledger for this use case to really lower the barrier to entry for these institutions. Axelar as well, integrating with Axelar, having interoperability is obviously essential for institutions from the tech side. And the last piece I'll mention on technology is Ripple custody, which is proving to be a really interesting and sort of logical entry point for a lot of these large institutions in terms of on-chain RWA. The place for institutions to hold their assets to on-ramp for these assets in Eden. So really excited about that. They're one of the top players in the space. They have a really strong mind around compliance and how they uphold those standards when it comes to tokenizing real-world assets. Ripple also announced an initial investment, initial purchase of their assets. So we'll actually, have some skin in the game and hold, on-chain treasuries on our balance sheet, which I'm particularly excited about. Crypto is well aware of the challenges there. The second is really around regulation. When we're bringing institutions on-chain, and James mentioned Project Guardian. When you have projects like this that's taking either real-world assets or native crypto assets and leveraging the power of the different crypto-based protocols, we have to keep in mind that there is somewhat of a braking mechanism there, or sort of a speed limit there, which is has regulatory clarity caught up, and none of us that are institutionally focused want to exceed that speed limit, so to speak. So we have to kind of put a little bit of brakes on the potential of crypto and blockchain in order for regulation to catch up. But I think we're making a lot of progress. There's a lot of bright minds working on the regulatory and legal side. So I'm excited.
Okay, so that part that you heard in regards to specifically, that bank that was mentioned, what particular bank? Well, he from the guy from Axelar talks about this particular one that I think it just, it just kind of grabs you, right? So German banks, right? Interesting. Now here's where it gets really, really, I hate to say it, bizarre. Back to David Schwartz's citation, or I should say his patent citation that we're going to cite here, because it gets really good. And what do you see there? You see, for example, David Schwartz Enterprises Inc., but the current assignee is Wintershall DEA Deutschland AG. Now, interesting that you see some of this talk, and maybe people think this is a giant coincidence. I don't think so. And if I thought it was just a giant coincidence, I don't even know if I would just do the video. I did go further with this. And when I got into it, again, back to the whole thing about the application was filed. And then again, don't forget the part about the current assignee, Wintershall DEA Deutschland AG. Now, when you go into investigating who they are, because a lot of times people don't do that. They just want to see all the parts about just Ripple XRP, but they don't go to the further analysis, if you will. Just on the surface, from the Wikipedia page, it's a German gas and oil producer. They have a joint venture that was created in May of 2019 by the merger between Wintershall Holdings, GmbH, and DEA Deutsch Erdol AG, which is an international oil and gas company in Hamburg, Germany. And basically speaking, what gets really interesting here is understanding that they have a 67% stake in it, and with the other 33% being held by Letter One, whose main ultimate owner is the Russian business magnate Mikhail Friedman. Now we're going to get into him in a bit, but as of 2020, it was planning on listing listing itself on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. But in 2021, again back to 2021, Wintershall DEA was ranked number 25 out of 120 oil, gas, and mining companies that were involved in the resource extraction of north of the Arctic Circle in the Arctic Environmental Responsibility Index. All right, there's a robust history about him. But again, back to this one guy I was pointing out, because again, you want to see this for yourself. This guy, Mikhail Friedman, man, oh man. He is one of the founders of this thing called Alpha Group. It's a multinational Russian conglomerate. According to Forbes, he was the second richest Russian as of 2013. We now know there's another particular gentleman, but again, he's part of the oligarch. There's many of them, right? That were resulted from the fall of the Soviet Union. That's a whole other story. But yeah, he's ranked way up there as, you know, the most important businessman, you know, in Russia. Has a net worth of 13.1 billion, but in 1991, and again, this is extremely interesting, he co-founded Alpha Bank, one of the largest private banks in Russia. Now keep in mind that connection of the current assignee, if you will, again, you know, before Ripple XRP was really Ripple XRP, again, dating back to who's the current assignee of that patent. That's crazy. So, you know, the connection to Alpha Bank, one of the largest banks in Russia. And as we go more into this, there's just a lot of crazy details about this, right? So here's the thing. When we get more into this, you may be wondering, like, well, Alpha Bank, like, tell me about them, not so much about this guy. Okay, check this out. Alpha Bank has this whole thing of them being the largest of the private banks in Russia, founded in 1990. And then it goes on to mention this timeline, but this was what's really, really caught my attention. 1991, they got a license to banking operations received by the Central Bank of Russia and first corporate accounts that were open. That's extremely interesting. In 92, Central Bank grants more licenses for broader activities. Alpha Bank opens first Nostro accounts. Wow. All right, how many times are we talking about Nostro Vostro with, you know, Ripple XRP and how ODL is a solution to that? So they opened their first Nostro accounts in 6 foreign, you know, banks. First retail branch opened in Moscow, and, you know, the rest is history. But I mean, there's so much stuff here. Like, you know, 1994. Listen to this. You know, actually before that, 93. Alpha Bank becomes member of Moscow Interbank Currency Exchange. General license to banking operations received from Central Bank. Alpha Bank starts dealing in government bonds. Again, bonds. Interesting. How many times have you guys heard me talk about tokenization of bonds, especially with Stellar and stuff like that, and, you know, Hedera, and just you name it. We talk about MasterCard. 1994, Alpha Bank becomes a member of MasterCard EuroPay International Credit Card Systems. Joins the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, aka SWIFT. Appointed bank's president. Alpha Bank becomes the first Russian bank to open subsidiary, Almaty, Kazakhstan. All right, so much stuff here. It just goes on and on and on about some of this stuff. And, you know, again, you're more than welcome to go down your own rabbit hole in regards to some of this. But they're a huge deal. All right, absolutely huge deal. So I thought that was interesting. And more importantly, as I get into some of the other weeds of things, you know, it's like when we talk about like BlackRock, right? Remember Aladdin? And there's the E token, 2008, and it's just crazy stuff. I don't want to get into that right now because, I mean, this will take 2 or 3 hours. Now, some of you guys are going to ask, does Alpha Bank have a whole connection to Ripple's XRP? Well, the answer is actually yes. You can actually exchange Ripple XRP to Alpha Bank in the form of rubles. And again, understand that there was the whole thing of sanctions against Russia. So this is interesting. So apparently that's a thing. And like it says, you can exchange Ripple XRP to Alpha Bank rubles. And, they give some examples on how to do that. And to get more into it, apparently there's this site called Alpha Cash. And what does it also show? Well, it also shows, for example, XRP to, ruble exchange, best XRP Alpha Bank exchange rates, Alpha Cash. And then I said to myself, interesting. I want to get more into this. Well, there is a citation, and the only one I saw was from BN Crypto, and it's about Russia Alpha Bank Digital Asset DFA. And one of Russia's biggest banks plans a digital financial asset launch. And like you see here, that was updated last March of this year. Interesting to see this because, again, back to the whole thing about portfolios, the Evergreen Portfolio DFA provides exposure to stocks, bonds, gold, money, market instruments, and there's all sorts of things here. But more importantly is understanding that Russia's Alpha Bank confirmed that it will conduct an issuance of digital assets on its, quote, A token platform, providing exposure to stocks, bonds, gold, money market instruments, and so on. But the Russian bank moves closer to digital asset, of course, adoption. So many people wondering what the BRICS nations are going to do. To get more further into it, I'm going to take you over to here. This is from CryptoNinjas.net. Alpha Cashier now supports Ripple XRP. And again, if you're wondering, is Alpha Cashier part of Alpha Bank? The answer is yes. Alpha Cashier is part of Alpha Bank. It's a subsidiary of Alpha Bank. So, you got to keep in mind that, its subsidiary service offered by the bank is providing cryptocurrency exchange and, payment services. But as we know, due to sanctions imposed on Alpha Bank in response to the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, the availability and functionality of Alpha Cashier services may be limited or restricted, of course, in some regions, and it's advisable for all of us to check that, right? So, interesting. Well, as you can also see here, that it had all these features, and, it definitely has this whole thing of, having exchanges with Ripple XRP long before, of course, the whole thing of the sanctions in 2022. But as I got more further into this, again, you see it all there, and you see that they have a crypto exchange platform. And again, the whole thing of even US dollars to ruble exchange. That's interesting. As I got more into it, how about from Alpha Cash? Is there any mentions about XRP? There is, because what you see here is specifically that throughout 2016 and 2019, Alpha Cash included other ones, Ethereum, Monero, and plain as day, as you see, XRP. As we get further into it, if you go to alphabank.ru, they talk about this being the most I think that's why of them saying physical, I don't know. But I can't even pronounce it. It's just the interpretation from Russian and so on. But it's like, what? We combine digital and physical experience? I mean, it's worth pointing out. They got something going on. But again, some key things coming up. And that is what you see here. Look what it says. Alpha Bank on the 9th of August says new acquiring trends, omnichannel, comprehensive support, and own delivery service. On August 9th, also, they have large corporate customers of Alpha Bank and how they're opening new accounts. But it goes on to also mention, and that part went away, I apologize, it was talking about institutional accounts. And that's another reason why I was bringing it to you guys. Now check this out. This is from a PDF that I want to get into. Because in this PDF, this comes from Foreign and Russian Experience of Blockchain, Digitalization of Central Banks, Financial and Technology Companies. Posted in 2020, but more importantly, or important I should say, any mention about XRP? Yeah, there is. it mentions specifically about a final statement, conclusions of this research and prospects for further development in a direction. And they talk about, for example, the Russian companies, or the Russian market, I should say, using tools based on blockchain tech, and they want to get involved in trade and all this stuff. But in regards to XRP specifically, you see here that they mention they need a system technology for the settlement, and they also need a thing of a payment system. And basically they recognize Ripple, and they recognize the use for XRP transfers or equivalents of fiat currencies issued by a participant through a national bank. And they determine that the mechanism for reconciling balances between the accounts of Ripple participants and national payment system, use of embedded cryptographic solutions on the Ripple network, development of a procedure for determining cross rates for internal currency of Ripple XRP when deciding to use XRP in interstate settlements. Think about that. Maintaining correspondence directories between addresses of the accounts of Ripple network participants, accounts of the banks, national payment systems. That's incredibly interesting to see that. And more importantly, when I did a search, it led me to this thing called Master Chain. And this is a citation from Korea, as in South Korea. This particular gentleman, his name is Sam Baek-G, back in 2023, came to the conclusion that Ripple platform can be considered as the basis for starting work on creating a system of cross-border settlements. Based on the research results, we conclude that Ripple platform can be considered as a base for starting work on creating a cross-border payment system, provided that the following organizational, legal, and technical issues are resolved: sending XRP or its use in fiat currency equivalents issued by each participant, for example, a national bank; determining a mechanism for adjusting balances between Ripple participant accounts and national payment systems, using embedded cryptographic solutions in the Ripple network; developing a procedure for determining the cross rate of internal currency of Ripple XRP when deciding to use XRP in weekly settlements. And then this last one, maintaining a directory of correspondence between the account addresses of Ripple network participants and the bank accounts they serve in the national payment system. My goodness. Here's some of the highlights from it. Again, it's just in case some of that went right past you. Testing the Ripple network national payment system. Ripple platform can work on creating a system that resolves issues, and they realize that the use of XRP for transferring currencies issued by obviously the Ripple network would allow a whole thing of determining cross rates for internal currency of Ripple XRP when deciding XRP in interstate settlements. I guess I just basically mentioned that. But again, Ripple network. Interesting to see all these particular highlights. Now, something I want to point out, because this is going to be something that, there's going to be at least one person and they're going to be like, yeah, but there's OFAC. OFAC is the Office of Foreign Assets Control. And look what it says in regards to sanctions list search. Well, you see here, the entity is a joint stock company, Alpha Bank. Interesting. And more importantly, you see financial institution, Executive Order 14024, and it mentions specifically like the Treasury and policy initiatives and sanctions and so on and so forth. And this was posted yesterday on the update. Interesting. Really, really interesting. This is why I'm bringing it to you guys. All right. What about the whole thing that Francisco Dennis Leal has? Well, TRM Labs has this. And this is how we tie in that citation that you saw from example OFAC. Because today's designation, at least back from February 23rd, 2024, targets individuals and entities that are used to facilitate transactions that help sanction Russian banks evade sanctions, and the ones that build upon OFAC's massive February 23rd, 2024 action that sanctioned 300 individuals and entities in order to deny Russia the resource necessary to support its war against Ukraine. While OFAC has targeted non-compliant Russian exchanges in the past, for example, SUEX, Chatix, Garantex for facilitating ransomware payments, sanctions, and evasion of other illicit activity, those sanctions against Russian fintechs for providing services to Russian banks is novel. Fintech's designations directly target the ability of sanctioned Russian financial institutions to build the blockchain-based payment rails they need to evade sanctions. In the wake of mounting sanctions, Russian financial institutions will continue to look for alternative payments. Think about that. And more importantly, like it says, Russia's use of crypto and other alternative payment rails. What would happen, and you see it in the news a lot, and I'm not trying to make this political, but the whole mention of Donald Trump, if he's, elected, and even as we speak, was he just met with Zelensky, for example, and, he boasts the whole thing like trying to, like, day one as President Trump, or actually after he's elected, right? When we go through the whole lame duck thing, right? Before he even takes office, if he was to be elected. It's the whole thing that, his promise supposedly is to end the war. Well, wouldn't it be a great benefit? Again, people say there's distractions. I think that's also a distraction in its own right, that sometimes not enough of us are paying attention to how much this would benefit Russia if they simply were to end this war, because then they would have access to all of what they were banned from. However, that leads me to this, and that is this. I want to point this out because some people feel as though that, when it comes to Russia, they don't want to be part of this whole thing of SWIFT anymore. That's why they basically went and did their own thing. And I'm going to get into that. And I know this is over an hour. I know this is quite the deep dive. I do appreciate all you guys who listen to this. The saying goes, people can press the pause button, but again, it is what it is. U.S. Department of the Treasury has this thing about this press release, and they get into the weeds about, as Russia feels effects of multilateral sanctions, there's a campaign of, the sanctions campaign, Treasury takes further action against Russia's international supply chain. This is posted just last August 23rd. And what's important here is, again, a lot of times we don't understand that there's these things going on in the background. And where I'm going with this is I want to point out this. It says here, specifically speaking, Russia has turned its economy into a tool in service of the Kremlin's military-industrial complex. Treasury actions today, at least then, continue to implement the commitments made by President Biden and G7 counterparts to disrupt Russia's military-industrial base and supply chains and payment channels, said Deputy Secretary of Treasury Wally Adamo. Companies, financial institutions, and governments around the world need to ensure they are not supporting Russia's military-industrial supply chains. To get more into this, look at this. There's this thing called ATOL. Is a Russian technology developer involved in services related to payments. Look what it says below that. Center of Financial Technologies Group, CFT, is one of the largest software companies in the Russian market. CFT provides an array of software products for banking and payment solutions for the Russian financial market. Why am I sharing this with you guys? Because I want you to understand that, there's that particular company, and it's like, is there any mention of, for example, the Center of Financial Technologies Group and also Ripple XRP? Well, to a sense there is, because even if we go through the whole thing of SWIFT, SWIFT recognizes them. And they point out that the Center of Financial Technologies Group, CFT Group, was established, boom, back in 1991 again, and a solution provider for the market or financial market of Russia and the CIS. The product range of CFT Group consists of the products of core banking, all kinds of banking activities, operation of financial organizations on the payment market, but CFT is in the list of top 5 largest software companies in the Russian market, and a top, basically part of the top 10 of tech USPEC rating of high-tech Russian companies. Now, you may be thinking, like, well, so what? Here's where it's not a so what. If you go over to cft.ru, and you got to be careful with that because, you know, Russian sites, right? But it goes on to mention application systems, and here's your first part of the, as I would say, your boiled mash stick in the stew. It's these upcoming events, everybody. On November 13th, 2024, coming up, look what it says. Signing messages sent to the SPFS. Now, if there's a few of you guys that know about SPFS, I'm just going to be honest. This is no pick on anybody. We're all learning. SPFS is Russia's solution to SWIFT. How so? It's their own, it's basically their own SWIFT. And this is, of course, where people feel as though that, yeah, Russia's going to do their own thing. Absolutely. They already planned this out years ago in the first invasion of taking over Crimea. All right? Crimea, tomato, right? But anyway, here it is. SPFS, everybody, is the system for transfer of financial messages, abbreviated SPFS, excuse me. Like I mentioned, Russian equivalent of SWIFT. Interesting. More than interesting. And again, boom, found in 2014. So my theory, it's not really a theory, but think about it, founded in 2014. In light of what? The first invasion of Ukraine, you know, when they annexed the whole thing of Crimea. So again, things, action, reaction. Check this out. This is crazy stuff. I mean, you know, it really, really is. If you understand the bigger picture of Ripple XRP and all this stuff, definitely worth pointing out. Because, as I take you over here, look at this for a second. I mean, you know, people just don't realize some of this stuff. Again, Russian equivalent of SWIFT, first transaction on the SPFS network involving a non-bank enterprise was executed on December 17th. Or excuse me, not 17th. December 2017. In March 2018, over 400 institutions, mostly banks, were part of the network. Compared to SWIFT, the system initially faced a number of challenges, especially in higher transaction costs. Haha. Think about that. Think about that hard. Because they realize they still have to have the technology, right? Exactly. So get more into this. Here's a citation from XRP-Wins. Russia's SPFS system, an alternative to SWIFT, is gaining traction with over 160 participants from 20 countries. And he puts in a # XRP. I'm not going to call that thing, you know, hashtag. I'm old school. Shout out to all the old school people here, right? We call it #, baby. Anyway, get back to the topic. September 12th, 2024. That wasn't that long ago. And the citation comes from Cryptopolitan. Putin meets top BRICS security officials. And look what it says. System expected to launch in October with 159 participants from over 20 countries involved, is designed as a blockchain alternative to SWIFT, the current system for international payments. And more importantly, recent interest rate hikes have also caused money to flow out of many global South countries, making their economies worse. BRICS countries see the new payment systems as a way to avoid relying on the dollar. Right. Or more importantly, SPFS is so they don't have to rely on SWIFT. You know, to be honest, I mean, you know, I imagine that if the war ends, why would you say, you know, oh, you know, we have pride, we're not gonna take that money and be able to, you know, if they lift the whole sanctions, right? It's, you know, it's a win for everybody, you know, even to have as much as you could like Russia or not, you know, it is a win for them. It's a win for everybody. So check this out. I want to share one last thing with you guys. I want you guys to understand big things are coming up in October. Number one, Federal Reserve Board. You have the whole thing of big events coming up. This is not buy the rumor, sell the news, everybody. This is literally just providing research and providing news. October 2024 is big for the Federal Reserve Board. At the conference on technology-enabled disruption, again, keyword disruption, implications of AI, big data, and remote work. These meetings are going to be in October 2024. And again, that's just, tip of the iceberg. Federal Reserve Board. What else do we have? Let's get more into it. You also see that there's going to be more, for example, activities that are going to happen in 2024 around, liquidity. But look at what we have here in regards to some of these other things. You have, for example, even KPMG has this upcoming thing about financial services regulatory priorities. Banking, prudential, insurance, and some other ones are meeting up about that, about capital markets. October 9th through the 10th from FINRA in Chicago, Illinois, regulatory priorities and emerging technologies. Again, think about it. That's on the 9th and 10th. Then on October 21st, you have proposed joint standards for financial regulatory data. It's a joint session about joint standards, October 21st, 2024. And again, it's just so many mentions. Like, look at this. Bank Supervision Operating Plan, starts October 1st, literally coming up here soon. Actually, that's October 1st, 2023. So that one already ended. Actually, that one ends tomorrow. Isn't tomorrow the 30th? Yeah. So that's coming up. So a lot of things coming up literally tomorrow, October, so on and so forth. I know this is quite the deep dive, but again, everybody, I want you guys to know, crazy to see these particular findings. I mean, my goodness, like, I just don't know if people are willing to, I don't know, take the time and go down the rabbit hole. I don't know. I guess this is the value I provide to you guys, and I'm glad to do it. I know that my videos aren't short. It's just something that I naturally do. I love to teach. I've done it for years, and this is my new form of teaching, if you will. So really appreciate you guys listening to the outline. Understand the bigger picture. There is a huge bigger picture. I mean, I'm not trying to make things conspiracy, but I thought a lot of this stuff kind of adds up. Draw whatever conclusion you want. I'm not trying to sell you on a conspiracy, but if anything, I'm trying to connect some things for everybody. Again, I really, really appreciate y'all. If you listen to this outline, simply do me a favor and type into the comments this key few letters, and that is SPFS, which is Russia's SWIFT, if you will. So SPFS stands for System for Transfer of Financial Messages. Again, SPFS. Type that into the comments. It will tell me that you listened to the entire outline. Really appreciate you guys. Thanks again for tuning in. I won't keep you any longer. Pay attention to everything moving forward. I know you guys are, especially the ones that listen. Know what you have, know why you hold it. The research trumps FUD 110%. We'll see you on the next one.
If managing your crypto feels like solving a puzzle, it's time to switch to Decent Wallet. Say goodbye to complicated setups and hello to Decent Wallet, the hassle-free solution to your digital currency needs. With just a few taps, you can manage, track, and secure your crypto with unmatched ease. And here's the best part. Grab your Decent Wallet at a discounted price by using the referral link below. Don't miss out on making your crypto experience smoother and more secure.